Well, I don't know whether, like me, you're utterly appalled by what happened yesterday. We saw, of course, the tearing down of the Edward Colston statue in Bristol. We saw, for the second day in a row, Winston Churchill's statue in Parliament Square being defaced. This time, though, with a mob around the statue screaming Churchill was a racist. We saw another assault on the cenotaph, this time with some yob climbing up there and trying to set fire with a cigarette lighter to the Union flag. These were just some of the highlights from what happened in the United Kingdom yesterday. It's not as if it was a surprise. After all, this all first unfolded last Wednesday outside the streets of Downing Street when, this Black Lives Matter movement was supposed to be so peaceful and so wonderful. Oh, look at the BBC, they'll tell you what a wonderful organisation it is. And it turned violent and ugly last Wednesday. It got even worse on Saturday. And then we saw those scenes of yesterday. There are now over 50 Metropolitan Police officers that have been injured, some of them seriously. And yet, my argument here isn't against equality of opportunity. It's not to say there may not still be things in society that aren't perfectly fair, but it is to say this, and to say it very, very clearly. This Black Lives Matter movement is a dangerous Marxist organisation, hell-bent on anarchy, and we need to wake up, get some facts into our heads, and understand what it is we're fighting. The main agenda of the Black Lives Movement and Black Lives Matters is the defunding of the police force. That's right. They want to effectively close down the established police force in the United States of America, and that's what the key activists in this country want to do as well. They're aiming at a radical redistribution of wealth. They're hinting at assets being taken from private companies and put into the hands of workers. I mean, look, this is a little bit like, the 1917 Lenin manifesto, which saw the communist revolution in Russia. That's the kind of thing that we're dealing with here. And it's very heavily funded. They're not short of money. They got some big backers, Soros, others, some very big backers of this movement who want to fundamentally overturn the norms of society as we see them today. You see, when I see Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson, they're in the House of Commons saying Black Lives Matters, in fact, in Hancock's case, parroting it over and over again, as if to say, look, I'm really one of the good people. This is not an argument about what had happened to George Floyd in Minneapolis. It's not about that. It's not about equality of opportunity. It's about an organisation that is hell-bent on changing society and prepared to use violence and anarchy to do so. And yet, have you seen or heard anything from the Prime Minister over the course of Saturday and Sunday? Late last night, he put out a tweet, saying how he regretted what had gone on and how people would be brought to justice. Well, I'm not too sure I'm confident about that. As yet, not a single person has been arrested for tearing down a statue and indeed for desecrating war memorials in this country. There is a vacuum, a complete vacuum of political leadership. It was also astonishing that Sir Keir Starmer yesterday said absolutely nothing that was going on. And it is because they all fear being labelled racist. They all fear certain sections of the press saying nasty things about them. And this has led to a green light to anarchy, yobbery, violence. And I have to say, I've lived through the Brixton riots, the poll tax riots, I've seen those things, but nothing as sinister and dangerous as this. At least when they smashed up Trafalgar Square and the poll tax was dropped, those demonstrators had got what they were aiming at. This group want to fundamentally change us into a Marxist society that erases much of its history and doesn't even have a police force. So they will stop at nothing. There's no concession that can be given that will satisfy the leaders of this organisation. And we've got to stop this policy of appeasement, because that is exactly what it is. So there's a vacuum of political leadership. There is an astonishing vacuum of police leadership. I have to say, I felt from Wednesday onwards very sorry for those police officers in the street in London, flares being chucked at them, bicycles being chucked at them, bottles being chucked at them. And of course, if any of them had responded too strongly, well, then, of course, there would have been absolute uproar, outcry, what would have been termed police brutality. There are even reports on CNN saying, how awful it is that police horses were used against innocent protesters. It's the same narrative as we're getting in much of the United States of America. Almost an excuse is being given for this behaviour because Donald Trump is in the White House and there is apparently a Conservative government sitting in 10 Downing Street. Now, look, I'm not saying that every single person that went there yesterday went hell-bent on violence. That is clearly not the case. And I'm sure there's a very good number of those that went, and they would have been, a lot of them, white, middle-class, university-educated, because this is what our universities are drilling into people these days, who would have thought they were there because there are some terrible, terrible atrocities committed with the police force in this country and in America against the black community. The numbers don't really stack up. Over the course of the last 10 years, just over 160 people have died in police custody in this country, and only 13 of them were black. And so you put that against the number of black people arrested compared to the number of white people being arrested, and actually, statistically, there is nothing in the argument. You could even argue in this country, you're more likely to die in police custody if you're white, but it's marginal. And the point I'm making is the figures in America bear that out too, although I think we all accept there is a much bigger black-white divide in America in every way. In fact, for minorities of all kinds, through centuries, this has been one of the greatest, freest countries of the world to live in. It's why so many people still want to come here. But this historical revisionism is now incredibly dangerous. I mean, there's not a single statue, is there, up anywhere in this country that doesn't relate to a time when women didn't have votes, when we had a British Empire. Indeed, there are lots of statues up to people because of their military prowess. I mean, who's next? Is it Oliver Cromwell because of what happened in Ireland? I mean, there is no limit to this. As soon as you start to redraw, repaint history, you're on a very, very dangerous slope. Cressida Dick, the boss of the Met, despite 50 of her police officers now being injured, some in hospital, said she understood. Yes, and last Wednesday she understood why some of them took the knee in front of the baying mob outside Downing Street, because she understood the injustices behind this. Cressida Dick, this organisation, Black Lives Matter, wants to close down the Metropolitan Police. It really is time. You, other chief constables, other police chiefs like the idiot in Bristol who says he has no regrets about letting them tear down a statue and chuck it in the river, whatever the history of the Colston family may have been. It's about time they got up, really, and got real with this. So there's a political vacuum, there is a policing vacuum. But maybe, just maybe, you'd pinned your hopes on the Archbishop of Canterbury. Maybe he's the man who would step in to this situation. But oh no, not a little bit of it. He, in fact, has been talking about the problems that white supremacy has caused over the centuries, and basically is best part supporting the motives behind these protests. But you see, it's not the motives that are the problem of many of the people doing this. It is the organisation itself and the motives of those that run this organization. That is where the danger comes. Now, into this vacuum, into this policy of appeasement, I would be very surprised if the situation did not deteriorate rapidly. Not only has a green light been given to those who want to go around and smash the place up, but there is uproar and outrage in Middle England. And there will be groups organised, coalescing around some right-wing figures who will want to start taking this into their own hands. Already, we've seen people who want to now go and defend the cenotaph, defend the Churchill statue. And that means we are not too far away from full-on street confrontations that'll be termed Black Lives Matters against the far right, because that's what the media will do. Either way, all of this will make divisions get worse, not better. This is now the biggest test of Boris Johnson's political career. Either he gets a grip on this, makes the argument, has the moral courage to make the case that we will not stand aside and see Marxist anarchists destroying the cities in our country. He needs to do that, or there's going to be more violence and more division. But he needs to do it very, very quickly.
We will make America great again.